questions, and the first question will be New Bias Wilborn.
Great. Thanks, KP. First of all, Jack, I love the picture, love the dog. So everybody here knows the way to my heart is through your dogs. So, and mine are here today because doggy daycare was closed. So if you hear them chiming in, that's exactly what it is. But anyway, as always, really appreciate you all hopping on and participating here, and obviously the coverage you give Penn State. I hope that through this pandemic, through COVID-19, that you and your families, I hope and pray, are remaining safe and healthy. I in these last 10 months have really had to, on many occasions, had to take a step back and really think about and acknowledge really what's happened here, and talk about our student athletes and giving them the opportunity to play the sports that they love. But the backdrop is also at this point over 400,000 deaths in the United States, and certainly both individual and societal huge economic impact. So that's really perspective that I think it's really important to acknowledge, that I carry around every day, and I think we all do, and certainly as Penn State as a university, that's a very healthy perspective that exists. One note that I hadn't necessarily planned to talk about, but with University of Utah's announcement this morning that our senior associate Charmel Green has been named deputy athletic director and COO. We certainly bid farewell to a great partner. Charmel's been at Penn State for 10 years now, has really played a critical role for us. And although I know blue will always be in her wardrobe, and being a Nittany Lion will always be part of her heart, she is returning to her alma mater at Utah, and we know she'll do fantastic, and we'll miss her, and are really grateful for everything that she contributed to us these last 10 years. So having said that, we've started to, or we have had fairly regular sessions like these since March of 2020, and probably each of those, I think this is the 5th session, each of those opportunities, I've been pretty clear about our priorities, and that's certainly health and safety of our student athletes, our coaches, our staff, and then ultimately that obviously can impact our community. And then how do we intersect that? How do we give our students an opportunity to train, compete, and play the sports they love? So much for our student athletes and for all of us, let's face it, but so much for our students is different. The ability to play, the ability to go to school, the ability to train is really part of trying to provide them with some small piece of normalcy, and both through an educational and an athletic growth and development standpoint, allow them to continue to grow through the pandemic. But I'm really excited and very confident and upbeat about our teams returning. I think we've got something like, I think it's 15 of our 31 are back up and competing, and obviously football will not compete this spring, but they will train. We will have spring ball, but they continue to whether it's train or compete. We continue to have a set of safety and mitigation protocols that are established, that our students and our staff did such a fabulous job with in the fall. So I'm very appreciative there, and really want to recognize a number of our units within Penn State ICA, but I mean everybody has pitched in. Everyone has sacrificed, both personally and organizationally. But the two that are really carrying heavy lumber certainly are our sports medicine unit, our athletic trainers, our docs. I want to give a shout out to Penn State Health. They've been phenomenal partners. And now with 30 of our programs competing in the spring, our event staff is certainly taken on a heavy load, and all of it again under the backdrop of doing it in a healthy and safe way. Certainly, we've had some COVID challenges. We had some in the fall, particularly when our teams first came back for the fall semester, and we've experienced that again here in the spring. At the beginning of the spring semester, or at the beginning of January, frankly, when we started to bring all of our teams back. But again, our sports medicine and our performance team, from a medical and science standpoint, have just been absolutely spectacular. We continue to follow their advice. You all know that, when we believe from a medical standpoint that we're at a point where we need to take some extra mitigation, we do that. And our coaches have been fantastic about seeking out that science and that data and that advice, and then taking it when it comes down from above them. So I'm very enthusiastic about this spring. I've had the opportunity to be out and be at some of our events here these last couple of weeks, some of the sports that have just gotten up and started. And there's nothing better than seeing those student athletes finally have the opportunity to put on uniform, compete against somebody else, and the smiles on their faces and kind of the joy in their voices is really what this is all about, in terms of knowing that we put a lot of hard work into allowing them to have the opportunity to do that, and do it in as healthy and as safe a way possible. So I look forward to your questions.
We'll start with New Bias, Wilborn, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and then Corey Geiger.
Sandy, thank you for your time, and also thank you for your patience for unfortunate two-part question, because you said something that interests me. So you're saying one, will spring ball, is that official? And then if for basketball, has it been worth the effort to get everything going, to get that going back playing?
Yeah. Thanks for the questions, Nubias. Number one, when I say spring ball, I'm talking about winter conditioning and training for our football student athletes. So I don't know whether you want to call it official or not, but just like with all of our sports, we're going to continue to train, and if it's appropriate in the particular sport, compete. Not appropriate for football, obviously, but we're going to continue to do that unless the conditions change and it's not safe or healthy for us to do it. So yeah, we're go.
Corey Geiger.
And then your question about basketball, yeah, it has been, because we're as long as we can do it safely, and you all know, you've heard me say this, that means with an acceptable level of risk. Nothing's zero risk. As long as we can do it safely, to give our students the opportunity to train, to compete, to do what it is they love to do while going to school, we're going to bust our butts to do that. So yeah, it's worth it. Every bit of it.
Corey Geiger, Nittany Sports Now, and then the next question will be to Donnie Collins.
Hi, Sandy. How would you evaluate Jim Ferry so far, and what would be the plan after this season in terms of coming up with a full-time head coach?
Yeah, so let me take the latter part first. Obviously not a typical situation, but there is one advantage that people know the job is open. They don't have to speculate, or it doesn't have to be a surprise. So in terms of vetting candidates and developing our list and kind of getting ahead of the game, we've been doing that. So the plan would be to name a head coach immediately following the conclusion of our Penn State men's basketball season. And my evaluation of Coach Ferry has really been outstanding. He obviously took over stepped in to a difficult situation. The Big Ten is an absolute beast, and you add to that COVID-19 and having to have a pause, and now our opponent, our next opponent, what was supposed to be our next opponent, has a pause. And I think number one, in terms of managing the great young men in our program, he gets stellar grades. Certainly we had a little bit of a losing streak there, but you got to give the guys and you got to give Jim a lot of credit for keeping the faith, keeping the confidence. We've gotten 2 wins under our belt, and certainly look to see what we can continue to do.
Donnie Collins and then Audrey Snyder.
Hi, and thank you, Sandy.
Hey, Donnie.
How you doing? I'm wondering what you learned from how the football team handled the daily testing, the uncertainties, and everything moving forward, about how well they handled that. And also, are you guys thinking at all about a blue-white game?
All these guys with 2-part questions here, KP. I don't blame you at all. Nice work, Donnie. So first of all, the first part of your question was a really good one. And, the fact that football was our only sport to compete in the fall, we've been trying to use those lessons. A lot of our head coaches have contacted James about, what did you do? And then the other part of that, obviously, is from a health and safety standpoint, we did really, really well. So number one, we learned that the mitigation protocols, the masking, the social distancing, the not gathering, that stuff works. Because those were the sacrifices that the young men in our football program made to have a full season and to be one of only 2 teams in the Big Ten to get all of their games in. And we learned a lot about whether it's how to do Zoom meetings, and I don't mean the technical part of the Zoom meeting, but what can you get done in a Zoom meeting from a sports standpoint, and what can't you? So there was a lot that we're looking to, a lot that from an event standpoint that we learned, and so thank goodness we got a football season in, and thank goodness that we had an opportunity to learn a lot from our probably largest and most complex sport that could then be applied to others. And then I think your second question was about blue-white. I think that's too early to tell right now in terms of what are the conditions going to be. If it were to be today, we'd be limited to about 2,500 in Beaver Stadium. The Big Ten right now, I don't know whether they had purview over spring games, but if they did, it would be limited to families of players and staff. So, we're going to have to get a lot closer to what the time frame would be before we can really decide if we're going to have a blue-white game and or what that might look like.
Audrey Snyder, The Athletic, and then Dave Jones.
Hey, Sandy, 1-part question for you.
Thank you, Audrey.
You got it. James brings in Mike Yursich. I was just wondering what you can kind of share with us about how that process unfolded, because it was so quick. And are there any financial ramifications from Kirk's contract that you guys then had to take care of?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Kirk had a multi-year contract that there's a buyout that we're obligated to, but it also has mitigation for him should he get another job. It's funny you referenced that it was a quick process. Well, I guess it's a little bit like the iceberg and what's under the water. I think you all know James by now that he's constantly evaluating, constantly. One of the things I love about him is that he talks to me, talks to Scott about almost everything in terms of just do you look? I don't have thoughts about offensive effectiveness or efficiency, but I certainly might have other thoughts. But he asked, and so it was he did a lot of evaluating to make the decision that what was best for the long-term success of our football program was to make a change.
Dave Jones, Penn Live, and then we will go to Mark Brennan.
Unmuting. There we go. Okay. Hi, Sandy. How are you?
Afternoon, Dave. How are you?
Audrey took my question, so I guess I'll jump on the back of that. this is clearly a new age in college athletics in two different ways. First, you've got all the mobility of these assistants who are, Mike Yursich was making $1.7 million and then 1.5 at Texas. And yet you want to try to get the best staff possible. And yet you're supposedly dealing with COVID austerity, which you and a lot of your AD brethren were talking about over the summer and fall. How do you reconcile the two?
Yeah, I think it really starts and ends with long-term financial stability and viability, which for almost all of us is going to manifest itself in success in football. And so like a lot of things that we've talked about over time, whether it be assistance and assistant pool, or whether it be facilities or other things, investment in football is also investment in football, and then success from football is always going to be a key factor. Yes. We have some financial challenges because of COVID, and we're probably those ramifications. It's still to be determined how long we might be dealing with those. But I also know that growing revenue is going to be a big part of the answer to any question or any way out of financial challenges. And certainly football sits at the top of that list.
Mark Brennan, and then we'll go to Rich Scarcella.
Thank you, Sandy. Can I circle back to the spring football practice thing? Do you mind if I do that?
Sure.
Hey, I wasn't quite clear. Is the plan now to actually have on-field practices, or are you taking a wait-and-see kind of approach to that? And will the Big Ten have any purview over that as well?
Yeah, I doubt the Big Ten will. I mean, the Big Ten certainly could. We as athletic directors certainly could decide that we want to do something more restrictive than the NCAA, what the NCAA allows. I don't see that happening. And so my comments were that we're having on-field practices for 30 of our programs right now. And that football certainly would be that 31st, when from an NCAA structure that they're allowed to have on-field practices. Obviously, they're going through training and winter conditioning right now, and unless conditions were to change for the worse, I don't see anything being other than us going through a traditional spring practice.
Rich Scarcella, Reading Eagle. Then we'll go to Mark Logan.
Hey, Sandy. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I know it's a long way away, but I'll ask anyway. How severe would the financial ramifications be if crowds were limited for home football games in 2021?
Yeah, it depends on how much they're limited. We're planning obviously on a 2021 season where we'll have fans. We can scale that from everything from 107 on down, and as we get closer to that, we'll have to take a look at if there are restrictions, what they are, and what the financial ramifications will be to it. So it just depends on what we're looking at. I think we're looking more at what will be the operational things. Do we think what role will the vaccine play? Will people need to show us certification that they've been vaccinated? Will people be asked to wear masks? Things like that have to do with how we operationalize and how our customers see, how our fans see coming to Penn State football. I'll tell you this: we're based on the rollover and new sales, we're over 90% renewed, if you will. You all know it. The passion for Penn State football and now the pent up demand is huge. Will there be people that won't come because of their concerns? Probably. There'll be some, but that's we have to operationalize it, and then we have to project what we're looking at from a revenue standpoint.
Mark Wogenrich, SI.com, and then Neil Rudell.
Hi, Sandy. How would you evaluate James Franklin and the football program's 2020 season? And then as a part two, sorry, you said in the past that you'd be more concerned when other programs are not interested in James Franklin than when they are. But when the outside interest comes up annually, what issues or concerns does that raise for the athletic department?
My evaluation of James is certainly our start was challenging and disturbing, but we also have to remember the context of which it was in terms of the pandemic, and ultimately everybody was going through that. So certainly the start was concerning, but I think that James and his staff certainly found a lot of answers. And whether it was we found our footing in a pandemic, or we actually solved some things schematically or personnel-wise, I think what we saw in the back half of that season is way more indicative of our program. Now, frankly, it's going to be a different squad in 2021, whether it be through graduation or leaving for the NFL or transfers or other things. And I feel very confident about James's leadership, where our staff is, and where our young men are right now. And I'm looking forward to 2021. And then you asked about always. Well, look. I think the biggest challenge is from a recruiting standpoint, in terms of having that question be posed. But I also think it's very flattering. It's very flattering to James, and it's very flattering to Penn State. And probably it's the same thing you're referring to, Mark. I'd rather have somebody that lots of other people want than the other side of it.
Neil Rudell, and then Ben Jones.
Hey, Sandy. Just curious on, have you had a vaccine, and what's the status of, all the athletes with the vaccines?
Thanks, Neil. No, I'm not 65, so not yet. I'm getting there, but no, I have not been vaccinated yet. Within, I think you all are probably well aware, the from a maybe it's not CDC, but from a federal standpoint, they did the 1A, the 1B, etc. And Pennsylvania is still on 1A, which primarily is healthcare workers and first responders. So within that, our athletic trainers and our docs have been vaccinated, but as a department and as a university, the university is not a supplier. The university does not have any vaccine. We're having to get it through either Penn State Health or Mount Nittany, and our advice has been to particularly our staff that they should be, because we've got some that are over 65. We're not obviously aware of what any underlying health conditions may be for our employees. So we have certainly encouraged them to contact their primary care physicians and get in whatever line exists. We certainly are encouraging folks to get the vaccine. We've been starting to socialize kind of the advantages of kind of a Q&A around, myths about the vaccine, so that should they be given the opportunity to get it, that they have everything that they need to answer any questions that they might have. Because certainly we all know in our society, we have folks that may not be that may be opposed to taking the vaccine, and we may have some that just have questions and need those questions answered, and when they're answered, they'll be willing to take it.
Ben Jones, statecollege.com. Then we'll go to Mike Gross.
Hey, Sandy. How's it going?
Good, Ben. How are you?
I'm good. I'm on Rover if you ever need a dog sitter. When we spoke to the men's basketball team at Media Day, there was pretty widespread discontent and borderline protest from players who felt left in the dark regarding the reasons why Pat was no longer their coach, and pretty vocal disagreement with the reasons that had been made public. In hindsight, do you have any misgivings about how that whole process was communicated with the team?
Look, I understand the question, and I understand the interest in the answer to that question, and I respect you asking it. But certainly, I made a statement in October. I know it fell short of what you all wanted. If there's any group that I would like to provide information to, it would be our students. But we've made all the comment that we're going to make, and I'm focusing on the season, and I think our students have done a really good job of doing that.
Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers, and we'll go to Nate Bauer.
Good afternoon, Sandy. How you doing?
How we doing?
Good. I'm proud to say that I have a two-part question.
You're part of that group.
James said numerous times during the season, James said that they were dealing with a lot of false positive COVID tests within the football program, and it was a mystery to him. He didn't understand why. And he also mentioned a couple times about how Penn State, being a relatively remote geographically, created some problems maybe in terms of getting the test results and stuff. Have you gotten to the bottom of either of those things, and what have you learned that's going to help you going forward in those areas?
Yeah. So James is absolutely right. Along with one other institution in the Big Ten, we in football, with the 5 analyzers that were in the Lash building to do all of football's tests in the fall, we did experience percentage-wise more false positives than again, along with the one other program. And we kept working with both the Big Ten, but more importantly, Quiddell, to try to get to the bottom of it. And I'll be honest, we never did. And so when they tried to move those analyzers to another location within Penn State athletics, we just sent them back and said, no, you take these back. False positives are part of the antigen tests, unfortunately. But what we have done, and we did this in football, is it's cumbersome and it's labor intensive, if you will. But we have we put our antigen positives with a driver, it's a staff member who's maybe underemployed at this point in time, and they drive them to the lab every day if we have them, and then we get those results back in the afternoon. So it's not ideal from the labor standpoint and maybe the cost standpoint, but we're able to get them back in a timely basis. But the good news is that we're not experiencing as many of them. So that was that rightly so. That was a little bit frustrating with football.
Nate Bauer, and then we'll go to John Petishnock.
Sandy.
Nate, where's the pink? I don't see it.
I've given up. I don't dress normally anymore.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Will you benchmark football against its peers from this season as a program? And if so, where do you see it? Like at what point in the trajectory do you see the football program versus where it wants to be?
Yeah, I mean, we benchmark all the time in a variety of categories, whether it's different financial things, resource things, whether it's number of personnel, whether it's success. I mean, you know how much of a data geek James is in terms of performance. So all of that is data that we have to look at. And I think you always I think this season for us was a great example of why you wait to the end of the season to form an evaluation. And again, I think that whether it's things that James has from a football side or that we do more holistically for the program and for the department, I think there are certainly things that we need to shore up, that we need to improve. We've got new things that are being thrown at us from a college athletics landscape, whether it be, we've talked a little bit about transfers and media eligibility or NIL or all those kinds of things, and we need to make sure as a department that we're prepared for that. But I feel very good about the trajectory of where we are from a football standpoint as well as a department standpoint.
John Petishnock, and then we'll go to Elton Hayes.
Hey, good afternoon, Sandy. Appreciate your time today.
Afternoon, John.
Hey, watching games last year, it seemed like a lot of coaches across the country didn't want to wear a mask during the game, or they didn't know how to properly wear it. They'd pull it down or wear it around their chin. And James made a point early on to say that even though it was a challenge with communicating, he wanted to properly wear the mask over his mouth and nose all game. So I wanted to ask, how did that stand out to you in terms of the larger message that he was sending?
Oh, I love your question, John, because it's, whether you want to talk about football coaches or, any coaches or student athletes or sideline personnel or bench personnel or athletic directors, and now that you say this, I meant to, and I know I've done it before, I meant to start the call with my mask on, just to make that point. It's so important. I have such admiration and appreciation for James because of the seriousness with which he took, number one, the COVID and the pandemic, but then the mitigation measures. I've got too many stories of whether it's friends who witnessed it firsthand, but maybe a coach or an administrator, or that hasn't taken it as seriously, and that's doing a disservice to our students. First priority, health and safety, and then if we can play and do it with an acceptable level of risk, we will. Well, the only way in my mind, to bring this down to an acceptable level of risk is to do all of the mitigations. I mean, it's no coincidence that we only had one positive in football during the season. And we know that was contracted outside of football. It was because James led the way, James modeled the behavior, James held them accountable, and the guys all bought in. And so I just, he made us to me, and in my mind, he made a statement about how important health and safety is and how important following the rules are, and that he's not just a football coach and not just interested in what happens on the field. He's interested in being a citizen of our society and being a damn good one, and being a role model. And I think, it's so funny you open your question the way you did, because I sit and watch, whether it's NFL games or college basketball games, and the one around the chin, on the ears and around the chin is the one that drives me crazy, because they know they're supposed to be wearing it, but they're not willing to wear it the right way. The other one that drives me crazy is the one over my mouth but not over my nose. It's they know better. They absolutely know better, and we've got to be better. And James helped us be better.
Elton Hayes, and then Peter Terpstra.
Hey, Sandy. I want to ask you about the basketball situation. If I can, a two-pronged question. First question is, in terms of looking for, whoever may succeed or whoever may take over the program next year, what metrics, have you and other people in the department look for and are really pointing out for that? And then second, has Ferry done enough, you think, to make him possibly part of that conversation? Just, everything.
Yeah, let me take the last part. I mean, Jim has certainly from the beginning indicated his interest in being a candidate. And as somebody asked me, my evaluation, I think that Jim's done some great things. I'm not going to make that decision until the end of the season. But he's got he's got a hands-on audition in order to make his case. And other candidates are auditioning elsewhere, which is obviously very useful. But in terms of metrics, there certainly are some on-court metrics, and in terms of how teams play, and outside of the metric piece, style, and those kinds of things. And I'm certainly relying on experts around some of that. But my biggest contribution, if you will, is to really look at fit for Penn State, fit for our students, our expectations for coaches around being educators, and how they work with and help our students develop and grow, and so in the end we'll put all that together and figure out who the best candidate is.
Last two questions for Sandy. We'll go with Peter Terpstra and then Greg Pickle.
Hey, Sandy.
Peter?
Financially, are you guys still expecting a budget shortfall? What do those numbers look like? And you've been able to protect all of your sports programs to this point. Do you expect that to be the case going forward?
Yeah. I've said all along that even though some around us, I think it's only been 4 or 5 maybe in the Power 5. Unfortunately, 3 of them have been in the Big Ten. Some around us have elected to cut programs. That's not something I'm interested in. It's not something I'm looking at. We've got a very proud tradition of and legacy of a large, robust program, and that's again, that's not something that we're looking at. We are continuing to look at a shortfall, but I know at one point in time I used the $60 to $90 million number probably with you all. Somebody accused me of using a 9-figure number the other day. I'm not sure I ever did that, but maybe I did, Chris. But to be honest with you, and I don't, I look at the net. I look at the net impact to us. So I couldn't give you the exact revenue or expense number. But thanks to a number of factors, and it probably leads with our community and our fans who have been phenomenal. Whether it's rolling their football season tickets to 21, or donating them, or it's been donations to our returning senior fund, or it's our One Team campaign. Our donors in our community have been phenomenal as it relates to helping us at this difficult time. We've done everything we can to make sure that our revenues stay, that we get access to as much of our revenues as we can. Obviously, we've not accessed ticket revenue and won't in this fiscal year. We have accessed our television revenue, which has been huge. And then on the expense side, there've been a lot of sacrifices. I referred before to both individual and organizational sacrifices. Our employees have taken pay cuts. We've had a small number of furloughs. We've held positions open. We've reduced our expenses by somewhere north of $25 million. So you add all that up. You use our reserves, which we were fortunate to have. We were hoping we were storing those away to do something else with, but we're fortunate to have them. And I think our number is going to come in somewhere between 20 and 25 million. So that's a big advancement from looking at 90 to 100 million. It still exacts some pain, but not what 90 million would.
I think you misheard me when I said 9 figures. We'll go to Greg Pickle for the last question.
On that note,
Sandy, to follow up on that, obviously you guys had a very ambitious facilities master plan that went out a few years ago, and certainly I'm sure has been impacted by this. Can you project yet how far behind you are on that based on the financial realities of the coronavirus pandemic? And do you have any plans to start any new projects anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you're right. I mean, the facilities master plan was always focused on philanthropy, was always focused on being funded by philanthropy, and we certainly have a couple of projects that have been really successful with that. Panzer Stadium certainly, Lash, our field hockey project. But some of them have not been, or maybe in different stages, or have not been as successful. And frankly, we've been looking at, and I just mentioned our reserve fund. We've been looking at, okay, how do we use some of our reserve funds to maybe help or plug a gap to move a project along. And that's probably where the pandemic and the financial realities will cause us to take a step back. That's probably the biggest impact will be that those reserves that we were hoping maybe to seed some of these projects, those reserves will now go to keep our deficit low.
New Bias did have he would like to ask a clarification on the financial figure you shared, so we'll have him join us right now, and then we'll
allow New Bias to do that.
Thank you so much, Sandy and Kristen. All of you guys have been great to us this year, Kristen, and thank you so much. Anyway, you said you guys are going to go from losing potentially 60 to 90 to now losing 20 to 25. I want to make sure I have that right. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a net.
A net, okay.
That's a net. So you take whatever our shortfall in revenues is, throw in what we've been able to reduce in expenses, and then throw our reserves or some good portion of our reserves on top of that, and our gap is going to be 20 to 25
instead of 60 to 90.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Sandy, and thanks everybody for joining.